Jaya Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Gaurachandra Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Jaya Gadadhar Jaya Srinivas Jaya Mukunda Vasudevi Jaya Haridas.
Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Welcome back to the GBC SBT page. My name is Deva Madhavadas, and we're very, very honored and happy to have with us today His Grace Ramesvara Prabhu. Prabhu, my obeisances, welcome.
Hare Krishna.
Jai Prabhupada. Ramesvara Prabhu is a devotee that needs no introduction, especially in the context of what we're speaking today, celebrating the Sri Caitanya-caritāmṛta. We all famously know that it was by his and a few other devotees' very focused efforts that this marathon of printing the Caitanya-caritāmṛta came to pass. And so we've invited Prabhu, and he's kindly agreed to come here today and share some of the inner workings of that experience. And particularly, my own excitement for today's interview is around helping us see the context of what allowed for that miraculous 2 months to really happen. In speaking with Ramesvara Prabhu before the interview, I was getting a sense of all the preparation that was required and all the infrastructure that Krishna Prabhupada had put in place so that such a wonderful effort could happen. Sometimes in our movement, wonderful occurrences like Srila Prabhupada's own starting of the movement in the West, we kind of reduce it down to a one small instance. Say Prabhupada sat under a tree, chanted Hare Krishna, and the whole movement happened. But it's actually a lifetime in preparation, as Satsvarup Maharaj beautifully writes in the Lilamrita, that allowed for that one kirtan to mean so much under a tree in Tompkins Square Park. So similarly, there was a lot of buildup to allowing these wonderful and miraculous 2 months to happen. And rather than seeing them in a vacuum, we're going to try to put them in the context of everything else that was happening in the movement at the time. So Ramesvara Prabhu, we'll turn over to you and just begin by discussing how it was that you were connected to the printing services through your own service to the movement. We all know that you were a book distributor also leading up to this. So how did that bring you into printing services?
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Sri Vasari Gaur Bhaktivedanta. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
Hare Rama,
Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to glorify Srila Prabhupada and his inconceivable potencies as he appeared before us as the representative of Krishna, as the personal direct associate of Lord Sri Krishna and Lord Gauranga and Nityananda Prabhu.
Yeah.
So when I first joined and came to this movement, I just, by Krishna's grace, had an insight that what Prabhupada was bringing was meant to save every soul. And when I grasped that, I prayed to be a book distributor. And when I first joined, book distribution meant taking books and trying to convince bookstores to carry them. And I was in the Portland Temple. And in 1971, Karandar Prabhu, who was the GBC for the Western Zone, he brought me down to New Dwarka to be his assistant. Excuse me. He was one of the trustees, although we didn't have trustees till 1972, but he was one of the devotees that was arranging for the publishing. Once the books, the pre-production had all been completed and it was ready to go to a printer, Karandar was arranging for the printing, having the books shipped to America. He had me organize a warehouse system and he had me organizing shipping books to the different temples and keeping track and accounting for them and so on. And up until up until this moment in our movement history, book distribution evolved from going to bookstores to going door to door. I give all the credit to the devotees in San Francisco, and it was they were led by Keshava Prabhu Karanda's brother. They invented Krishna book hardbound book distribution door to door, and the concept spread everywhere. And so, as we were in the early days going out on chanting parties for like 10 hours a day and distributing back to Godhead magazines and packs of incense in front of the Harinam party, it evolved into Sankirtan leaders scheduling devotees to be dropped off in neighborhoods all over the city, trying to sell Krishna books door to door. And if you could sell 3 or 4 Krishna books in one day, it was considered a miracle. So this was going on up until the end of 1972. I was the Sankirtan leader and going out every day on book distribution in LA. And somehow or other, we sent out the devotees in December, 3 days before Christmas date, in front of different department stores and shopping centers. And normally our hours would be 8 hours a day, but we couldn't leave because the throngs of people kept going in and out of these stores. They were open till midnight. And so the result in 1972 was the first unplanned, wonderful Christmas marathon for book distribution. And we had distributed, between magazines and books, more than 17,000 literatures in those 3 days. And I wrote to Prabhupada. It was actually my first letter that I wrote to Prabhupada describing this marathon. And Prabhupada was naturally very excited. 17,000 literatures from one temple in 3 days. This was unheard of.
Yeah, earth moving.
So going into 1973, that was the year of discovering every type of method for distributing books. We were trying malls. We were trying, of course, we continued shopping centers. We discovered by accident, seeing big crowds on Hollywood Boulevard going into concerts. And one day, Tripurari, as he was being ready to drop off, he said, "Wait a minute, take me to that airport, LAX." So 1973 was our experimenting with every type of forum you could imagine, wherever the most people would gather, that's where we went. And somehow if it was private property, we went in anyway. We convinced the doormen and guards to let us in. If there were personnel in the airport that wanted us to leave, we would hide from them but never stop. 1973 was this amazing year of discovering all the places you could distribute Prabhupada's books in. And maybe the most important part of this was our sending out our best men from LA and from the West Coast to different temples all over America and eventually all over the world to share with them the techniques, the lines, how we distributed so many books at one time. So that was 1973, the year of discovery. And 1974, I consider it the year of mass book distribution exploding all over the world. Now, the reason I'm recounting this is because in 72, the total proceeds for the BBT was something like $300,000 a year. In 1973, it was over $1 million a year. In 1974, it was over $2 million. I mean, it was exploding and doubling. And
exponential, really. If 300,000 to a million and then 2 million.
and in those days, that was a lot of money.
Yeah.
So without that book distribution as the basis and foundation, we needed that in order to do this marathon. And the reason is, well, let me just explain what led up to the press moving to LA, and then you'll see why this vast explosion of book distribution funded everything. Actually, I used to say, Prabhupada built this movement through the BBT. So at the end of 1973, Karandar stepped down as actively being a BBT trustee. And Srila Prabhupada asked me to carry on his work. I was the official BBT secretary at the time, but I knew what Karandar was doing in negotiating with the printers and Dynapon, and of course I handled all the shipping anyway. So Prabhupada said, "You do it, and we'll decide how. We'll see how you do." And this in 1974, the BBT was in two locations. The press devotees, the art department, all the editing, all the pre-production was done in Brooklyn. And the publishing and warehousing and shipping and sales, marketing, that was all done in LA. At the end of 1974, our second BBT trustee, Molly Mardan, he stepped down from his active role. And so now there was no BBT trustee overseeing the printing. Production. So when this happened, Srila Prabhupada was just coming to LA on one of his world tours. And I was speaking about it. He asked, could I had done somewhat efficiently or adequately what Karandar had been doing. Prabhupada asked if I could do what Bali Mardan was doing. Now, I have never worked with the press devotees and the different operations, so I blurted out, no. I can't do that. I don't know anything about it, but at the very least, I said, Srila Prabhupada, it's a full-time position, full-time work. I already had to cut back on my book distribution just when Karandar stepped down, but I can't be in two places at once. And then Prabhupada said, well, what if it was all in one location? I said, you can't ever say no to Srila Prabhupada.
He's always got to come back.
Our understanding of Prabhupada was he had descended from the highest realms of the spiritual world, being a direct associate of the Panchatattva, of Lord Gauranga, Lord Nityananda, Dvaitacharya, Radha and Krishna combined together. He was their direct associate, sent into this mundane universe and earthly realm to bring souls back to Krishna. That was our vision of Prabhupada. He was not a soul coming up. He was a soul who had descended, a pure devotee, Uttamadikar in the highest plane, who had descended and who was surcharged with the ability to save souls everywhere. So that's how we saw Prabhupada, and always will see Prabhupada. He's quite different from anyone else, practically speaking, in that sense. So he said, well, what if we brought it all in one location? Then could you do it? And all I could say was I would try.
He had you pinned at that point.
Prabhupada had me fly with him from LA. We stopped in Dallas, and then we flew right to New York in February of 1975. Now, you have to understand one other thing about Srila Prabhupada. He had finished writing the fourth canto back in 1973. He stopped working on the Srimad Bhagavatam. And in an 18-month period, he translated and wrote purports to 17 volumes of Sri Caitanya-caritāmṛta, which he completed by November of 74. I mean, this is like a miracle. For us, it's a miracle. For Prabhupada, it was just, this is what he was sent into this universe by Krishna to do, to organize this Hare Krishna movement, but practically give up sleeping just to write his books. His schedule was inconceivable to an embodied soul. And how he did this was amazing. So by the time Srila Prabhupada wanted me to fly with him to the press had already published Adi Leela Volume 2. They started with that because they had started as a paperback, Chapter 7, which had all this amazing nectar about Lord Chaitanya and the Panchatattva plundering the storehouse of love of God, and how the storehouse of love was brought to this realm and distributed. So they started with that hardbound volume. And then in early 75, they came out with Adi Leela Volume 1. The reason it's such a large volume from this original 17 books is when you start in Volume 2, whatever is before it, you have to make in one volume. So anyway, so we flew to Brooklyn to have Srila Prabhupada meet with all the press devotees and present this idea to them. Prabhupada was so amazing. He was our absolute Lord and Master. But he humbly asked the devotees if they would agree to this, relocating. So if you ever were in his presence and you were surrendering your soul, your life, everything to him, and he's humbly asking if you would agree to do something, these are almost inconceivable things in the same sentence. Of course, everyone would say yes to Prabhupada if they saw that's something he wanted. But that was Prabhupada. He asked so humbly to all these devotees in Brooklyn Press, would you agree to this? And when they said yes, he thanked them and said, okay, now at our upcoming Mayapur festival, March and April 75, we will present this idea to the GBC and ask them if they would agree to it.
Wow.
That same mood. The GBC was totally surrendered life and soul to Prabhupada, and he's asking them humbly, please consider this. Would you agree? What do you think of this idea? So that's how Prabhupada sometimes dealt with us. And that's, I mean, absolute humility and absolute reaching into our souls to inspire us to do whatever he wanted. So in that way, it was decided that the entire ISKCON press would move to New Dwarka at the end of the Mayapur festival. And 3 or 4 of the artists, that's all we had in the art department, they came just before the festival to LA, but the rest of the press came after. So what does that mean? It means we had to get a building exclusively set up for every department of ISKCON Press, for artists, for photography, dark rooms, typesetting, composition, editor offices. We had to have all of that set up. We had no idea we were doing a 2-month marathon. We were setting up a building for all these devotees. And we also had to arrange within the LA community, New Dwarka, housing for all these devotees. Many of them were grihastas and had families. And so at the end of the Mayapur festival, Prabhupada had opened the Krishna Balaram Mandir in April of 1975. As soon as that was done, I rushed back to New Dwarka to complete these preparations for the housing and for setting up the press equipment and so on. And somehow or other, excuse me, between that time and sometime in May of 75, we had everything set up. We had bought new equipment, and the entire press flew to New Dwarka, and we got them set up. So by the end of May, everything was set up and ready to go.
Wow.
I know it was it was not an inexpensive endeavor. So this, coming back to how the BBT explosions and discoveries had built up serious funds. 50% of the funds coming into the BBT was for book printing, and the other 50% went into a temple fund for Prabhupada to give out as loans and very infrequently as grants. This principle of 50-50 was never included the cost of any overhead, the cost of any shipping. It was purely, here's what the printer charges us. Let's say it was $1 a book. Sell it to the temples for $2. Forget the overhead for the press, the artists. Forget any other shipping costs. Just printing is $1. Sell to the temples for $2. And then the temples would go out on the streets and double it again. Sell the $2 to $4. So they would keep half the money. They would send the $2 to the BBT, and the BBT would strictly, religiously divide it 50-50. 50% back into printing. The other 50% was available for temple construction or acquisition. So by the end of 1974, with the BBT bringing in millions of dollars, there was a sizable amount of money available to bring the press over, acquire and equip a building for all their offices and work, and set up all their housing. So book distribution funded this marathon. Book distribution funded press relocating. Basically, book distribution funded our movement. That's why I said you built this movement on the BBT. The BBT was like a central spiritual bank. Anytime leaders around the world wanted to buy land or buy a temple or buy a chateau, they would write to Prabhupada. And if he agreed, he would write to me and say, okay, now I want you to send this amount to let's say, Madhavisa in Australia to buy the Melbourne Temple, or this amount to Bhagawan to buy the chateau in France, or this amount to Hansaduda to pay for printing in German, and whatever they were asking for, that came out of the temple fund mostly. You may wonder what happened to the overhead and the cost of shipping and all of that.
Yeah, that's a natural question because those things are very expensive.
Prabhupada would give money from the temple fund as a 5-year loan. Let's say in the first year, Prabhupada loaned out, let's say $500,000. We'll just say. That means in the second year, those temples would start reimbursing 1/5. So 100,000 would come in. But in that same second year, another 500,000 would be loaned out. So now in the second year, from all the loans, instead of just 100,000 coming back, 200,000 would be coming back. The loan payments is what I used to pay for all the overhead, all the shipping. When we needed a law firm, constitutional law firm, to start these legal cases, to open up state and county fairs and college campuses and airports all over the country, that was it. Lawyers were expensive. All of that was paid for by this separate source of money, loan payments coming back in. And by using that money for that overhead, we were able to keep the cost to the temples literally just whatever the printer charged, just double it. And as book distribution exploded, the orders of each volume grew. So if you're printing 20,000 per copy, it's a certain price. If you're printing 300,000 of that same book, the printing cost comes down. The cost to the temple goes down. When the cost to the temples go down, they distribute more books. So the way Prabhupada had set this up, book distribution had to always double. It was incredible.
And that money coming from the temples was most likely also raised almost exclusively through book distribution, because at the time there wasn't much of a congregation. There weren't many donations coming in elsewhere. It was mostly through the sales of the books.
Primarily, yes. So now we come to this moment with Prabhupada has the press moving to LA. He had appointed me as a BBT trustee at the Mayapur Festival of 75. And now he's leaving India through going from us to Australia, Hawaii, and then to LA. And during the last month before the marathon, before that, and during his travels, he completed the 2 colossal volumes of the 5th canto. So time Prabhupada is in Hawaii. Once again, we're 17 books behind.
Krishna.
We had only, the press had only, before they moved, had only published Adi 1 and Adi 2. So there's Adi 3, that's 1 volume. There were 9 volumes of the Madhya Lila. So that's 10. There were 5 volumes of the Antya Lila, that's 15. And now there were these 2 colossal volumes of the 5th canto, that's 17 books.
Wow.
So Prabhupada is in Hawaii, and his traveling secretary starts calling me. It's around the middle of June, and saying, I want you to know that Prabhupada has me calling the senior leaders of our movement, especially the ones based in North and South America, to join him when he arrives in LA on June 19th or June 20th. They're all flying in. Ramananda, Tamal Krishna, Vishnujan, Kirtanananda, Satswarupa, Rupa Yuga, Jagadish, everybody, any senior leader or sannyasi who was Bhavananda came, everyone who was in North America at that time was ordered to meet Prabhupada in LA when he arrived. And his secretary calling me from Hawaii, telling me, I'm arranging all this because Prabhupada's very angry at you. So I thought we had just done something wonderful. In less than 2 months, we acquired the buildings, the housing, the equipment, and we relocated the whole press operation, and we're ready to go.
One coast to the other. Yeah.
And I said, Prabhupada's angry at me. And anything coming from Prabhupada was sweet nectar, whatever the mood was. It was never mundane anger. This was like spiritual, ecstatic anger. So Prabhupada was directing that towards us or towards me. It was to inspire and challenge and awaken and empower. So I said, why is Prabhupada angry? And he explained the 17 books have not. You better have a plan and you better present it to him. And he's having all these senior devotees to come and to reinforce how angry he is with you. So I had met with Radha Ballava, and we had brought in Hare Griva to help editing. And we had this idea. The press had been publishing 1 book every 4 months. And we had this idea how through a proper assembly line organization, we could change that to 1 book every 2 months. But when we started getting these calls, we realized we have to set up 2 simultaneous assembly lines. If we did that, and each assembly line could produce 1 book every 2 months, that would be 2 books every 2 months, or on average 1 book a month. We were so ready for Prabhupada's arrival. We had this amazing, great plan. We had all thought it out. So Prabhupada arrives in LA and gives this amazing arrival address. June 20, 1975. If you ever have a chance to hear this arrival address, the hairs on your body will stand up. Prabhupada is describing in the most personal terms how he received this order from his Guru Maharaj, that whenever he gets money, print books in so many languages and distribute throughout the whole world. And he's relaying this to us. And in the middle of this arrival address, he's saying, therefore I am, where is book? And he used his hand almost like he was beating us with a stick. I'm asking, where is book? Where is book? Where is book? 3 times he said it. So we're all sitting there drinking in this pure nectar. We had already given our whole life to selling his books. And now he's in front of us demanding where his book distributed throughout the whole world. And we were so ecstatic. So the next morning, June 21, we are on a morning walk in Venice Beach, and all these sannyasis there with their kidandas, and all these leaders are there, and we're having these great morning walk conversations. And in the middle of it, Srila Prabhupada, without even turning back to look at Radha Vallabha and me, he says, so what is your plan for printing these 17 books? So I run up from being behind Prabhupada so that he could see me as I'm just saying to him. And I explained how we had planned out this amazing production process, which would average 1 book a month. And I thought Prabhupada would be so pleased going from 1 book every 4 months to 1 book a month. This is, I really expected something much different from what happened. Prabhupada slowed down in his walking and was musing. So 1 book a month, that means more than a year. 17 books. Meanwhile, he's translating and authoring purports to new books. How would we ever catch up? It would never happen. So as we had explained, this 1 book every 2 months times 2 assembly lines, the number 2 was in the air. That sound was in the ether. And Prabhupada just finally turned to me, looking with a spiritual glance into my soul, into me, and said, no, I want all 17 books in 2 months. Now, there were so many reasons why that was impossible. And I was ready to explain them all to Prabhupada.
You just thought about them quite thoroughly in trying to get to this other standard that you wanted to offer.
I learned the whole process of what the press did in every stage of production. And so I started off by blurting out, because I tended to blurt out things. Prabhupada, that's impossible. And I expected that we would now have a short but serious conversation where I could explain why something is impossible to God and his pure devotee. I didn't realize when I blurted that out who I was really talking to. The representative of God walking the earth, a direct, personal associate of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the spiritual world, come down into this world to save the souls. And there I am, this puny, ignorant 23-year-old about to tell Krishna's representative, oh, this is impossible. So at that point, Prabhupada stops walking and he plants his cane in the sand. And now he looks at me in a different way with such gravitas and such intensity. And behind him in a semicircle are Brahmananda, Tamaha Krishna, John, Kirtananda. They're all there in the semicircle staring at this conversation. As Prabhupada said, with a glance that could, I don't know, rip apart universes or maybe make planets float, whatever. Whatever potency there was in that glance, Prabhupada said, impossible is a word in a fool's dictionary. And he continued to look at me with that spiritual glance.
Mm.
There was this long pause. I have no idea how long, but I think Prabhupada was making sure that I grasped that he means it.
Mm.
He's not just saying this in the way any other person in the universe would say something.
It's not
He means this.
yeah.
And all these great sannyasis and leaders are staring at me. I could read their expressions like, yeah, now what are you going to do? Or in some of their eyes, I could see, I'm so glad I'm not him.
Mm.
And then Prabhupada started walking again. They're all following Prabhupada, and Radha Bolivar and I are standing frozen, stunned. We don't know how to, we're trying to assimilate what just happened. And in those few moments, by Prabhupada's mercy, remember, whatever Krishna's dearmost devotee wants, Krishna will make happen. Krishna, the way a devotee loves to please Krishna, Krishna loves to please his pure devotees.
Mm.
So Krishna wanted this to happen because Prabhupada wanted it.
Mm.
So in those moments, they're walking on, we're starting to have these realizations of the concept of impossible and how mundane a concept it is to think that anything from Krishna or his inconceivable potencies that manifest billions of universes, fills them with planets that float perfectly in orbit, spreads life everywhere, that somehow something is impossible for Krishna. And here's his direct, personal, intimate associate telling us to do something, and I stupidly, like a fool, said, oh, bro, this is impossible. So we grasped the idea that this could be done. And we run up to Prabhupada. We just talked it out. We can do this, Prabhupada. We will do this.
Mm.
We had no idea how, but we said, we'll do this. We go back to the New Dwarka. Prabhupada gives his morning program. Radha Bolivar and I meet with all the press devotees to explain that Prabhupada has just injected into us this potency to do something impossible. And we have to pass the same injected potency into every press devotee.
Mm.
And that's what happened. Every one of them was totally incredulous because they all knew what it meant. What, we're going to send a book to a printer every 3 days? I mean, 17 books in 2 months.
Yeah.
How do you even finish it? There was so many things. So we talked it out and we came up with 3 broad concerns. So I went back to Prabhupada and said, Prabhupada, we really believe we can do this, but can I please ask you 3 things?
Mm.
First, and this was a big reason why they had fallen so far behind. For years, Prabhupada had created a Sanskrit department. They did not know Bengali. They knew Sanskrit. Caitanya-caritāmṛta is Bengali.
Mm.
And Prabhupada, our Sanskrit department does not know Bengali. They don't understand the language, the subtleties, every part of it. We need you to stay in LA long enough so that they could come and visit you every day for some part of your day, and you will teach them the entire Bengali language so that when you start traveling again, they will know Bengali. That was our first condition. And Prabhupada said,
You'll accomplish a lot with that. You'll get to keep Prabhupada also. That was a clever move.
Well, it was needed. Literally every morning, our Sanskrit department would spend several hours with Prabhupada in his personal quarters, asking questions and learning all the nuances of the Bengali language. It was astonishing to see how this happened. Prabhupada stayed 3 months. When he left, they knew Bengali. So that was the first condition. The second condition is we knew we didn't have enough devotees because we had this idea of 2 assembly lines, but we never had the idea that each assembly line would operate 24 hours. So we needed like a 12-hour shift and another 12-hour shift times 2 assembly. We needed more devotees who might have had some skills, either in typing or composing or editing or anything. And we had, but if we could write to the temples around the world and beg them to send such devotees just for 2 months, loan them to us for 2 months, that they can go back. But we need them for 2 months. And Prabhupada said, oh, yes, you can do that.
Now, I want to ask briefly, do you think that's also why maybe Srila Prabhupada brought in those leaders from around the world so that there would be that consensus of accepting the need for others to come?
I think in part, yes. But our leaders in Europe were not there. In India, they were not. Kriyananda was there, of course, from South America, but probably. That's a very good insight. Because Prabhupada has so many purposes behind everything he does. Because who can write a book that's going to be relevant in 100 years? How fast the world is changing. Okay. Who can write a book that's going to be relevant in 1,000 years? So to just understand how Krishna empowered Prabhupada, when he told us that his books would become the law books for all of humanity for the next 10,000 years, they would remain relevant. They would remain literally, everyone would refer to them. Our brain can't conceive of such a thing. It's beyond us. Prabhupada's potencies, Prabhupada's abilities, the way Prabhupada thought things out, what he saw, not just how he looked at history and current events, but how he looked at the future.
Yes.
Prabhupada was inconceivable, Krishna's true representative. And the third condition, that was the hardest. Our artists always had questions each time a manuscript was put before them. They would read it, they would find scenes that would lend themselves nicely to fine art paintings. But they would have questions on every book. There's never been a time when the artist did not have questions. They had the simple, basic questions of what kind of clothing they wore, whether certain personalities had beards, mustaches, or ornaments, or if they were pastimes on other planets. What did those other planets look like? I mean, there was never-ending questions. So the artists would get together, write out their questions, and mail the questions to Prabhupada. And back then, the mail in those days, by the time it got to Prabhupada, especially if he was traveling in Europe or India, especially, it might take a week to 10 days to get the letter to Prabhupada. The secretary would read the questions, Prabhupada, without saying, I'll circle back or I'll get back to you. instantly knew and spoke the answer to every inconceivable question about anything in the whole universe or beyond the universe. Prabhupada immediately knew the answer and dictated to his secretary the answer. Prabhupada was the knowledge that Prabhupada had of everything, both within our universe and beyond. He never needed to look anything up when he was answering these questions. This is astonishing to realize this about Prabhupada. So then the letter would get written, Prabhupada would sign it, and then it would get mailed back to wherever the press art department was. That would be another week to 10 days. So by the time the artist got the essential questions answered, maybe 3 weeks had gone by. And then they would, out the painting. It would take them 3 months to do a fine art painting. So we could not imagine painting for his books unless we could, whenever the questions came up, bring them to him instantly. While he was in LA, we'd walk right into his quarters and ask him. When he started traveling, we begged him, can we please, on the phone, which he hated, call your personal secretary wherever you are. Have him write out our questions over the phone. Have him run into your quarters or wherever you are. Have you give him the answers, and he instantly runs back to a phone and calls us back with the answers. If we don't do this, we won't be able to paint for your books properly. And he reluctantly but agreed to that.
That was the biggest pinch, was the phone.
Yes. So with that, the marathon was ready to begin. And the first thing that I did with Radha Ballava was we locked ourselves in my office and we took the 15 unpublished volumes of the Caitanya-caritāmṛta and we read the raw manuscripts in about a day and a half. Because I had asked Prabhupada, it may be hard to paint 17 original paintings for each book, but Chaitanya Leela, 500 years ago, many of these places, historic places, still exist. What if we sent a press photographer to India, all over India, and that devotee took photographs? Would we be allowed to publish the photographs in the place of a fine art painting? So maybe that way, instead of 7 paintings, we would be able to do 5 on average. Prabhupada agreed. So we read the whole 15 remaining volumes. We wrote out what we wanted photographed. The press photographer was a devotee named Bhargava. And we gave him the list. And we're apparently, what part of India it's from, according to the manuscript. We gave him a round trip ticket. And we sent him to India. We developed a system where he would air freight, wherever he was, the undeveloped film with notes on what each image was. He would air freight it back to us. We had a budget for this.
Wow.
And this was going on throughout the whole marathon. And one point, we were having trouble reading his handwritten notes. And we had made a mistake. And some of the photographs on 2 different volumes were incorrectly captioned. But we had already sent those 2 volumes to the printer. But our process was to always send to Bhargava back by air freight what we were sending to the printer. Okay. So he was constantly getting interrupted to go and collect this. And he got very excited and he rushed to a phone and called us and told us the mistake. And we had to go call the printer, stop the press, and change those captions, and then they could continue their printing. So that was the intensity, just in one department of this marathon.
One little detail was so much sensitivity.
Well, getting to the press, let me just explain. We had been printing our books and magazines with Dai Nippon in Japan. Prabhupada had gone there and negotiated. This was so amazing how he had negotiated a credit line for magazines and another separate credit line for books. We all know when he paid in advance with George Harrison's donation, got to be able to print the Krishna books, even though money was owed on the magazine credit line. So what happened in 73, 74 is that the oil producing nations of the Middle East got organized, and they did this embargo to stop shipping their oil to countries around the world so that they could have power, get more money per gallon, whatever it was. Well, Japan is an island. They had to pay for paper to be shipped in. Then they had to pay for the printing books, shipping to their clients around the world. The cost of this during this oil embargo period was astronomical. And it meant there were delays, and it meant additional costs that we could not incur. And I explained to Prabhupada that we have to look for another printer. Prabhupada is so loyal to anyone who's rendered service to him. He did not want to take our publishing away from Dai Nippon. But when he heard the explanation and how it was necessary, he very reluctantly agreed. So we're searching all over America, and we found a company named Kingsport Press, division of Arcadia. They were the second largest printer in America next to Donnelly Press, but they were the largest printer of hardbound books. So one of the miracles of this marathon is, how do you get a major printer that has relationships with every major publishing company in America and major authors in America to suddenly stop their committed schedule to print those books for all these publishing houses and authors, and instead put us at the front of the line when they've never done anything with us before.
Yeah.
So I was negotiating with the president of Kingsport Press, and he was Krishna from in his heart. But he was realizing, hey, they just printed 350,000 hardbound abridged Bhagavad Gitas with Dai Nippon. That was our last printing with Dai Nippon. I said, imagine if they gave me that business. So I'm explaining to him, we got these 17 books. I'd asked Prabhupada, how many volumes should we print of the Caitanya-caritāmṛta? I thought it was just meant for devotees. He said, no, it's meant for the whole world. You can't even approach Radha and Krishna without going through Lord Chaitanya. You have to give this to the world. So Prabhupada approved that we would print each volume 20,000 hardbound copies as the first printing.
Wow.
So I'm explaining this to the president of Kingsport Press, that we have 17 titles.
Times 20,000.
Yes, so 340,000 hardbound books right away. But when you change a title, you have to change a lot of things with that press equipment, the setup and everything for a different book, different art, and whatever. We needed all their printers, machines, dedicated just to this 2-month marathon. We needed this company to push back on every obligation they had for every major publishing company in America. And somehow or other, they agreed to take us as ahead of everyone else for this 2-month marathon. How Krishna got this president of this company to make this decision is part of the miracle of this marathon.
Wow.
Similarly with the paper mills, where we were buying paper for this many books in a short period of time to be shipped to Tennessee. That's where Kingsport Press's equipment was located. And the paper mill and their salespeople to agree to push us ahead and sell the paper for our marathon. So these were like behind the scene logistical miracles to set up. Where's the paper coming from? Where's the printing going to be done? How do you actually do a book every 3 or 4 days over 2 months? It's not normal. So that was part of what we were organizing. If you ask me when did we organize all these things, I couldn't explain how much was packed into 24 hours, day after day. It just was. Somehow or other, which has nothing to do with us and our imperfect senses and our limited minds and intelligence and all of our impurities, that Krishna would use us as his vessel to satisfy his devotee, Prabhupada. In spite of all of our disqualifications, we became like instruments and tools and puppets, which had nothing to do with us, other than one thing, that we were agreeing to whatever it takes to do this for Prabhupada. So somehow or other, how to organize these things happened in a miraculous way.
Mm.
I'll give you another example with the artists. We know how long it would take them to do a fine art painting. During the Krishna Book art marathon of late 69 into early 70, they had created an assembly line where 3 artists would work on every canvas.
Mm.
Bardraj, Jadharani, and Murlidhar. So after that marathon, and when they started really painting for the unabridged Bhagavad Gita, the artists did not obviously like that. They wanted to do their own painting from beginning to end. So now here we are. We have to somehow come up with 100 paintings in 2 months. There is no way the artist could do this all by themselves.
Mm.
So one day, one of our Harinam parties was at Venice Beach when the beautiful chanting, which attracts so many souls, attracted a man in his 30s who was walking on the sand holding his shoes, and approached the kirtan party and was so attracted to the transcendental sound vibration. He wanted to know more. He agreed to come back with them in the van to our temple. While they're driving back, this 15-minute car ride, they're talking to him, and they found out that he's an artist. So as soon as they got to LA Temple, somebody ran into the press building to get me. Hey, we have another artist for you. So I come running out, and I start talking to Bhakta Hector.
Mhm.
And Bhakta Hector had a unique artistic ability for painting entire landscapes, hills, oceans, trees, forests, populated with all the leaves and shrubs and everything that you need in a landscape.
Mhm.
He could do that in like 1 or 2 days. Canvas. He just had this ability. We tried him out. We had him do the background landscape on every single painting during this 2-month marathon.
Off
Now,
the street.
it's a miracle. Where did this person come from? I mean, you have to picture this. We have a Harinam party walking on a walk, and here's this soul, as if he had come out of the ocean, as if the demigods or Krishna had sent him. He's just walking around on the sands, hearing the Harinam kartals and Danga and holy names, and just said to us.
Hmm.
So that was a miracle.
Yeah, no doubt.
And we also had an assembly line for the artists. They all agreed to have Hector paint their backgrounds, but they did not agree to the other things that were going on. But
Mm.
I'm looking. Hey, I'm sending this book to the printer tomorrow. Now the artists would, let's say, someone would be painting and would finally fall asleep around 1, 2 in the morning. If I saw that any other artist was still awake, and if that painting was needed for the book that we were sending out the very next day, I would go to that artist's easel where he had collapsed or left it, take that painting, bring it to whichever artist is left awake, have them set aside their work, put this on, say, I need this finished because I'm sending it out to the printer tomorrow. Then I would bring it back to the original artist's easel. By the 4th week of this marathon, I think it's fair to say that every artist hated me and wanted to kill me. How did we even come up with the paintings? After we had sent Bhargava to India, Radhabal and I locked ourselves in my office again and reread the manuscript of the 15 books again to now come up with scenes that we wanted the artists to paint. So we gave that list to our artists. So we didn't have them reading the manual. We had to make that decision for them. I mean, that's how fast things were going. And somehow or other, we were empowered to read 15, 17 books of manuscripts in like a day.
That itself is amazing.
It's just how we packed in everything in the 24 hours. I'll tell you part of how it was possible. The excitement about this marathon was spreading throughout the whole LA community and then gradually throughout our whole movement.
I'm sure.
So the leaders of the LA temple community wanted in. They wanted to feel the same ecstasy that we were beginning to manifest. We were becoming so attached to Prabhupada. You have to understand, Prabhupada was creating an environment where if we gave up sleeping and eating, it didn't bother us. How is that possible? We're just conditioned soul devotees, young devotees. We're not Goswamis. We're not pure devotees that could do this. But Krishna's potencies, Prabhupada's desires awakened in our heart such an attachment to doing this for Prabhupada. It didn't, somehow we gave up sleeping. There were certain deep devotees, I tell you, never slept. So the New Dwarka community wanted in on this. And so they agreed, and we organized it in a very careful way. Men, women, and so on. The LA devotees would do their laundry.
Wow.
On every level, the devotees, their undergarments. The LA devotees would bring them prasadam at different times, everyone in the press. If they needed anything, toiletries, toothpaste, if the ladies needed something, the LA devotee temples would go out and buy it for them. Nothing could stop the press devotees from their work. So the LA temples support the whole community, made it possible. And they started feeling this same ecstatic attachment that we're doing this for Prabhupada, we're giving up everything for Prabhupada. No one ever thought about I'm doing someone else's laundry. They just said, what an honor. How ecstatic.
I'm getting this image of the Mahaprakash Leela where Mahaprabhu is finally allowing the devotees to worship him. Everyone's running to get Ganga water and whatever they can find. And some devotees are actually offering it directly, but many are just gathering whatever can be offered in front of Mahaprabhu. And that's how it feels like as you're describing this. I
have to tell you, in the 5th week, oh, by the way, Prabhupada after 3 weeks had left. I think I gave you some photos of Prabhupada touring the press as this marathon was first organized. I don't know if you want to share them, but
I'd be happy to bring those up.
While you're doing that, I just want to tell you that around the 5th week, Radha Bolivar and I we raced. Oh, this is our production board. The rest of the photos, you'll just have to imagine what they were. But the first column was all 17 books. And the top row was every stage of the production that was necessary for the book to go through before we could send it to the printer.
Project management in the 70s.
We had this, this is the pre-digital age. Everything was manual. And so we created in one day this production board. So after a few days, Prabhupada said, let me come and see the press, how you're organizing this marathon. These photographs are going to show you slide by slide Prabhupada's tour of the press during the marathon. He's looking at transparencies. He's looking at manuscripts. Prabhupada was involved in every detail always of his books. These books were Krishna, non-different. They were the transcendental soundbite representations of Krishna. So Prabhupada would be involved in approving the art, approving the cover, jacket art, approving end paper, approving the size of the book physically, approving the number of pages per book, approving the quality of the paper of the book, approving every detail of his books. He was in that way like the world's universe's greatest conductor. And we were players, and he's conducting this, but he is involved in every detail.
This image is Prabhupada receiving a finished copy?
Yes, yes. I was, by the end of the marathon, I had just turned 24. So you have to picture many of these first generation devotees never even made it all the way through college and didn't have these uh, transcendental skills needed to assist Prabhupada in his book production. Somehow, abilities came by the divine arrangement of the Lord wanting to use us to please Prabhupada. So anyway, in the fifth week, Radha and I jump in a car and race to the LA airport. It's around 2:30 in the morning because Kingsport Press had just shipped us some boxes of the advanced copies, the first 3 volumes of the Madhya Leela and the first 2 volumes of the Ancha Leela, 5 new books. We get them out of the whatever that department area of the airport was. We race back to the temple. Mangal Artik in LA is at 4:30. So between 4 and 4:30, the pujaris are still dressing the deep, but they allowed us to go onto each of the 3 altars and set up one of each, the 5 new books on each of the other. Go to Thai altar, the Rukmini Dorkadish altar, and the Jagat Baladev Subhadra altar. So by the time those doors open to the sound of the conch shells at 4:30, now there are about 300 devotees in the temple room at least, maybe 350, whatever the number was. The deity doors open, and everyone can see the new books, the altar, and the realization that the impossible is becoming manifest is so intense. I mean, in that temple room that morning, devotees everywhere were crying like babies, jumping up and down, screaming the holy names. They didn't even know how to contain what they were feeling, what we were seeing. And that Mangalarti, I have no idea how long it went, but I can tell you, in my life as a devotee, 50 years now, I've never been to a more ecstatic Mangalarti. Nobody's feet were touching the ground. We were out of our minds in ecstasy looking at this miracle of Prabhupada's new books appearing and being given to us as after they were being offered to Krishna. So those are some of the marathon stories that were going on. Literally every department was operating maybe 20 out of the 24 hours or 22 out of the 24 hours every day, 2 different assembly lines for everything. Hayagriva was a faster editor. He did the Madhya Leelas. Jayadvaita did the Anta Leelas. I mean, it was like the most efficient science that we had no idea how to do this when it was first ordered to be done. And it just happened. The ability, the ideas, the intelligence, every part of this marathon came into us, not from us. Coming into us from Prabhupada and Krishna. And we were just puppets.
You've really given us a glimpse also of us that would like to have some connection to such a wonderful service, that simultaneous surrender to the mercy and the practical application of your own aptitude, your own ability. You all gave so much. And the buildup that you gave us was beautiful also. It's reminding me how all of Mahaprabhu's associates, before he really manifested his own presence, his associates were all strategically placed. And at Advaita, we had Srivas, everyone had appeared in different parts of West Bengal to be able to manifest the Sankirtan movement. And you brought us from 1972 up until this culmination of the marathon. And we can see moving the pieces.
I have to add just one last part.
Please.
75 was the year of miracles, clearly.
Yeah.
In the middle of the marathon, or some point in the marathon, I get a letter from Prabhupada saying he's just signed a contract to finally build our Juhu Beach Rasbihari Temple in Bombay. And this contract required that Prabhupada pay them something like $70,000 a month for the next year, about close to $1 million.
Mhm.
So Prabhupada's writing to me saying, okay, so in addition to you printing your regular books for mass book distribution, and in addition for you coming up with enough money for 340,000 new hardbound books, and in addition to dividing all the money 50-50 so we could keep giving the temple their loans, somehow, on top of all of that, I need you to come up with an extra $1 million from distribution so we could build our Bombay temple.
Hmm.
At this point, nothing is impossible. Everyone in the movement knew there is nothing that you can't even say the word impossible anymore.
Mm.
It's not part of our vocabulary. So we got this letter. I broadcast it to the book distributing teams all around the world that somehow you have to increase book distribution even more than ever before because we need an additional $1 million over the next year on top of our normal increases to build the Bombay town. And the book distributors, they felt so connected and so dedicated, giving their life heirs, their whole body and soul and mind to Prabhupada giving out the books, that they did it. And they were connected to this marathon. And that's how simultaneously we did the 17-book marathon and we built the Bombay temple and everything else continued. These are inconceivable potencies at work that were inspiring the devotees to become madmen in love with Prabhupada.
It helps that I love how you frame that, because I wanted to segue this marathon in a way set the stage for a continuous printing marathon that lasted as long as Prabhupada was still with us. I believe the BBT didn't lose step with Prabhupada's pace of translation after this period. Is that the case?
That's part of the case. What we were feeling during this marathon, we never wanted that feeling to end. Ever. So we're writing in the last month of the marathon letters to Prabhupada, please, Prabhupada, we'll do this for you. We will publish as quickly as you author, and then we will distribute millions of copies of your books as quickly as they are published. None of us in this movement ever want these feelings to go away or stop. We want to continue this forever. Please give us the rest of the Bhagavatam. Please engage us in this way. We're writing these fervent letters begging Prabhupada that we've never felt anything like this. Love, devotion, dedication to you, giving up everything in the world for you and for Krishna. These feelings were so intense. These attachments were so deep and ecstatic. And we're begging Prabhupada, don't let this stop. Don't ever take this away from us. Let it continue. And we promised him that as quickly as he writes, we'll publish. And we never broke that promise, ever, from that moment until the end of 1977. We kept pace, and distributing with Prabhupada. And that's how he awakened in us spiritual emotions that were lying dormant. They came to life because of Prabhupada. And they still exist. We could still have these feelings of giving up everything for Prabhupada and his Sankirtan mission of saving countless millions of souls in every part of the world, and maybe even beyond. Some of us may take other births to continue the Sankirtan work of Prabhupada, either here on the earthly plane or maybe somewhere else. I'm convinced that demigods were waiting in line just to take birth on earth so they could grow up to become book distributors. We were convinced that there is no greater pleasure in the whole universe. And those who want it will come down here to become book distributors. That's how we thought.
Srila Prabhupada sent you all a letter at the end of the marathon. Could we share that with the devotees now? That might be a nice close as he closed it for you all.
Yes, please, if you can share that.
Sure.
Generally, when Prabhupada wrote me letters about book distribution, I would put the quotes, or wrote anyone else letters, I would get the quotes and put them in the monthly BBT newsletter that went around the world. And that was, remember, we didn't have internet, we didn't have Facebook, we didn't have any of these social medias. This was the mass communication of Prabhupada's latest instructions or quotes or feelings that we were sharing. So I don't know if you can find the letter, but
are you able to see it now? No?
No, there's a picture of me giving a new book to Prabhupada.
Okay, one moment.
But this letter at the end of the marathon, all my other letters Prabhupada wrote to me personally, but this letter he wrote to everyone that was involved. He said Ramesvara and Company. And the address that he used was the press building that we had acquired, not the normal temple address where I normally would get my letters from.
Hmm.
And so even if you can't find it,
it's here. I just have to.
It's okay.
And it's not. Oh, you have. Wow.
I'm just holding it up so
that's sweet.
They can actually see that this exists.
Yeah, that's direct.
This letter. And at the end of the first paragraph, where Prabhupada is describing, appreciating what just happened, he wrote, "You have taken seriously this work." Yeah, that's it. This last sentences of the first paragraph. "I know that my Guru Maharaj is pleased with you because he wanted this. So by this, your endeavor, you will all go back home, back to Godhead." This is Prabhupada telling imperfect souls who just happen to be feeling the ecstasy of what Prabhupada had come here to give out, telling us we're going back to Godhead. When? I can't say. This letter is our ticket to the spiritual world. That was the blessing that Prabhupada gave his devotees.
As somebody from the next generation, I can say that the Caitanya-caritāmṛta is our ticket. When we read those pages, we have you devotees to thank. And the access to Mahaprabhu's Leela is because of that effort that you gave. So on behalf of my generation, our pranams, and we thank you.
Well, let me tell you about your generation. In 1973, when Prabhupada was visiting LA, every night I would write out the Sankirtan results, the names of the devotees, how many books they sold, and bring it to his quarters. Ramananda was the secretary, Shrita Kirti was the servant, and I would wait at the bottom of the steps, give them the letter, and I would just wait there to see if Prabhupada had any comment. And sometimes they would, like one night they came back and Prabhupada said, "Who is this Ramesvara?" I was like, I nearly fainted in ecstasy when I heard that. He asked, "Who is this?" But one day, with his lotus hand, he took a pen and hand wrote a note at the bottom of this report. And I published that note around the movement. It just thanked us. You've sacrificed so much going out, despite all difficulties. He said, "My Guru Maharaj will be pleased upon you 1,000 times more than me. And that is my satisfaction." So that's the mood of the spiritual grandfather. So now to your generation, I tell you, whoever your initiating guru is, thousands and thousands of times more than that guru could ever be pleased. Prabhupada, 1,000 times more mercy is going to be bestowed upon your generation. And that is your guru satisfaction. Just take Prabhupada's words and pass it on to you. Give your life to the Sankirtan mission, and you will get 1,000 times more mercy from Prabhupada than we got.
That's an exciting proposition. Thank you so much, Ramesvara Prabhu. This has been ecstatic. We have a few comments. One devotee, Mahavishnu Priya, is saying, thank you so much for this wonderful detailed history of this miracle episode of our treasured books. I lived through this time, but did not know full history until now. I'm very grateful to have been part of this exchange, just to be able to witness it in such a direct way. And thank you for laying out such a comprehensive vision of what it took to allow this miracle to happen within those 2 months. So much before, and also, as you pointed out, afterwards was made possible because of it.
And believe me, the printer and the paper mills, if we did not have enough money from 73 and 74 book distribution, they would not have taken our request seriously.
Krishna. Okay, thank you so much, dear devotees. Thank you, Ramesvara Prabhu. Srila Prabhupada.
All of Prabhupada's eternal followers from whatever generation we may be.
Hari. We here at the SBT are continuing our build-up to the Caitanya-caritāmṛta, studying the Caitanya-caritāmṛta, culminating, of course, in Gaur Purnim in just a few days. So we wish all the devotees watching a blissful build-up and a wonderful celebration of the most auspicious day of Mahaprabhu's appearance. Thank you again to devotees like Ramesvara who are taking their valuable time to come on and enliven us in our meditations as we build up to that celebration. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada.
Jai.